Picture this. You wake up tomorrow morning to a headline that literally rewrites the rules of human existence. The greatest biological breakthrough in history has just arrived. And that ultimate, looming deadline that's governed every human decision since the dawn of our species, it's basically been cured. And we're not just talking about squeezing out a few extra years in a nursing home here. We are talking about a complete and total biological reset.
So, what if you lived to 200? Just imagine being the very first generation born into a world where old age isn't a final chapter anymore, but, merely a midpoint. You'd be living in a reality where you could study, build an empire, fail completely, start all over again, totally reinvent yourself, and still have well over a century left in the bank. Suddenly, everything you ever thought was too late to do, well, you've got time for it again.
200 years. I mean, it's a number so absolutely staggering, it forces us to completely rethink civilization from the ground up. This isn't just about longer lives. It's about a wildly different reality where 5, 6, or maybe even 7 generations wouldn't just overlap. They'd blend, they'd collide, and they'd completely reshape what it actually means to be human. It sounds like the ultimate gift, right? But to get there, we have to fundamentally rewrite human biology.
Okay, let's dive into this. To actually make a 200-year lifespan work, medicine has to drastically shift from just treating diseases to actively managing the machinery of human vitality. Aging wouldn't be a natural decline anymore. It becomes a straight-up engineering problem. We're talking about relentless, everyday medical miracles here. Actively repairing cellular damage, shielding our organs from wear and tear, and preventing cancer way, way more effectively than we can right now. It means the widespread use of regenerative medicine and literally using nanotechnology-based repairs to keep your body's internal engine purring flawlessly for 2 straight centuries.
Section 1. The 2-century lifespan. If we actually achieve this biological miracle, the first major shockwave wouldn't even be physical. It would be entirely psychological. We'd go from a state of constant panic and urgency to either deliberate patience or, honestly, a kind of restless uncertainty.
Think about it. Right now, our entire human experience is dictated by the ticking clock. We're all pushed through this funnel of urgent milestones. You feel that intense pressure to pick a path, become one specific thing, and just stick to it. But in a future with a 2-century lifespan, because time is so incredibly abundant, your identity becomes fluid. You're no longer pressured to lock yourself into a single narrative forever. Instead, your life becomes this fluid series of distinct, decades-long chapters.
The idea of late in life would become obsolete. Just take a second and let that sink in. A 25-year-old wouldn't have society breathing down their neck to have their whole life figured out. A 50-year-old, they're barely getting started. And a 100-year-old could confidently sit down to learn a completely new skill, start a totally new relationship, or build a massive company from scratch. The whole rhythm of civilization would slow down, deepen, and really expand.
Section 2. Redefining work and education. Moving on to the practical stuff, a 200-year lifespan completely shatters the structural day-to-day of our lives, especially when it comes to our careers and schooling.
And this brilliantly illustrates exactly what that new roadmap might look like. You might wrap up your very first career around 65, which, crazy enough, is the age people currently retire. Then, instead of heading off to the golf course, you head back to university. Imagine being a 65-year-old college freshman. By 110, you're launching your 3rd major career in a totally different industry. And at 150, maybe you take a well-deserved 20-year sabbatical. The traditional concept of a career basically goes out the window.
So we're moving from a one-track 30-year professional arc to a highly dynamic system of role rotation. You can't just learn a trade at 20 and expect it to carry you all the way to 200. It doesn't work. Universities would have to transform into lifelong hubs of continuous learning. You wouldn't just go to school once to get a job. You'd return continually to build mental resilience, learn adaptability, and completely reinvent yourself for the next 50-year phase of your journey.
But here's where we hit our first massive societal roadblock in this explainer. If people are perfectly healthy at 150, why on earth would they step down from their jobs? If nobody actually retires, the workplace becomes hopelessly clogged with highly experienced, centuries-old workers who simply never leave. How do younger people rise up the ranks if the top seats are permanently occupied? Without some strict new rules on term limits and career phasing, our society could become severely stagnant.
Section 3. Love in a long life. And this tension doesn't just exist in the boardroom. It completely rewrites our most intimate personal bonds.
Consider this concept for a moment, the urgency gap. Culturally, the physical age gap between generations would practically shrink to nothing, right? Because a 140-year-old parent and a 25-year-old child are both highly active, energetic adults. But the emotional tension? It would be off the charts. You'd have a parent with over a century of life experience trying to give advice to a 25-year-old who feels zero rush because they know they have 175 years left to settle down. The wisdom gap is still there, but that shared sense of urgency we have today completely vanishes.
So the crucial point is, what happens to romance? Till death do us part carries a wildly different weight when death is deferred for 2 whole centuries. Would people really still demand a single, lifelong bond spanning 200 years? Or would society just have to accept that the human heart evolves, leading people to embrace flexible life stages and maybe multiple distinct marriages over their long existence? It really forces us to question what permanent commitment actually means.
Section 4. Power, Planet, and Population. Scaling up from our personal relationships, we have to face the absolute crushing macroeconomic weight this longevity would drop on our global systems.
Let's neutrally break down how our major current systems would essentially buckle. In politics, short election cycles currently limit power, right? But a 200-year lifespan could create entrenched elites holding influence for an entire century. When it comes to wealth, we currently plan for a 20-year retirement. Imagine needing a 100-year financial plan. Property and inheritances would remain locked up for generations. And as for the planet, short-term fixes would be out. We'd likely be forced into building incredibly dense, vertical cities just to manage the spatial reality of billions of people who aren't passing away.
The stark reality here is simple. More life equals more demand. Without incredibly strict justice and meticulous resource planning, we'd be facing a massive population explosion. We would see extreme pressure on food, water, and housing. This kind of longevity would heavily favor the wealthy, hardening these rigid dynasties that stretch across centuries. To survive all this, humanity would be forced to develop highly efficient planetary tech, or seriously commit to building off-world colonies just to relieve the sheer pressure on Earth.
However, there is a massive potential positive here. Right now, humanity is pretty obsessed with quarterly profits and short-term wins. But if you know for a fact you're going to live to 200, you're going to care a whole lot more about a 20-year climate catastrophe because you will personally be alive to suffer the devastating consequences of it. Shifting to a 100-year horizon might actually be the thing that forces civilization to finally become truly mature and responsible with our planet.
Section 5. The burden of memory. Now, let's slow down for a second. Because beyond all the logistics and planetary resources, there is a hidden, intensely philosophical toll to living this long.
Human beings are not built only from experience. They're also built from forgetting. Over 200 years, the accumulation of emotional weight would just be staggering. Think about it. You would outlive multiple social circles. You'd watch friends, partners, and maybe even communities pass away or fade out over and over again across the centuries. The sheer emotional exhaustion of carrying 150 years of personal history, grief, and constant change, that is an incredibly heavy burden to bear.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how it highlights the profound risk of stagnation. Yes, we need entirely new forms of mental health therapy to process centuries of grief, but look at the cultural impact. A whole society could become trapped by old ideas simply because the people who invented them refused to leave the stage. And on a personal level, without the ticking clock to create urgency, people might fall into crippling boredom. They could just drift through the decades, completely numb, lacking that passionate hunger that a short life naturally gives us.
Which brings us to the ultimate lingering question of this whole explainer. If time is no longer short, what are you actually living for? When time is scarce, we rush. We rush to build a legacy, to love, to succeed. But when time is abundant, you can't use the excuse that you didn't have enough years. You have to actively choose your meaning. A longer life doesn't automatically guarantee a fuller one. So would you truly use those extra decades to live more deeply, or would you just endlessly postpone your life, always planning but never truly living?